Hi there, I'm Chris Crescent. This is Talking Tsundoku Blues. Today I'm talking about the Book of Elsewhere. No, this is not some kind of mindfulness, new age exercise, nor is it Keanu Reeves' autobiography, which is actually what I thought when I first saw it. This book was actually not written by Keanu Reeves, it was written by China Miéville, the SF speculative fiction author and new weird poster boy. And it expands upon Keanu Reeves' 2021 comic called Berserker. That's Berserker with no vowels, no E's. Which I have not read, but it was compared to Bloodshot, and that actually got me interested in Bloodshot. So China Miéville basically expanded the world, he added some new elements, and they collaborated together on the story. So what's it all about? Well, the main character B, or Unut, as he's sometimes known. For the sake of this review, I think I'm just going to say B, because I'm not sure how to pronounce his other name. The main character B is 80,000 years old, and he can't die, or I should say, when he dies, he immediately resurrects in a kind of an egg-like sack, either in a random location or on top of his previous pile of corpses. Previous corpse or previous pile of corpses. Yeah, it's quite violent. B has seen it all. He has 17 PhDs, and yet he can't use a computer very well. He can speak every language. He can read battle scenes like a book. He can get drunk, but not as drunk as he likes. So, who is B? Why is B? What is B? Is he a cursed man? Is he a demigod? Is he an alien? What is this? Well, let's take a look and see if we can find out. Alright, welcome back. First of all, just let me say that I am a huge China Miéville fan. I think his work is amazing. Perdido Street Station is maybe my favorite science fiction novel of all time. It's absolutely incredible. Set in the same world, New Crobuzon, the city of New Crobuzon, also The Scar, equally incredible book. He's got all different kinds, all different styles of experimental fiction. There's also The City and the City, which was fairly popular a few years ago. Kind of a detective noir with a very bizarre sci-fi twist. And I was a little surprised that Keanu Reeves would hook up with China Miéville to create a book like this, because I feel like this is more in the wheelhouse of Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman loves to collaborate with anyone, and I've never seen China Miéville collaborate except on Dial H for Hero, which is also amazing. DC Comics, Dial H for Hero, China Miéville, collaborating with some incredible artists on this very obscure old title that he resurrected for the New 52. Really, really great stuff. Anyway, China Miéville, amazing. Keanu Reeves, yeah, I mean, I like Keanu Reeves. Who doesn't like Keanu Reeves? He entertains me. That's all I'm going to say about that. China Miéville once said that he wanted to write a book in every genre, and so when I first saw this, I thought, oh, this is his celebrity ghostwriter piece, which is actually not so far from the truth. So I'm going to talk about the first few chapters, and then I'm going to give my overall impression, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The worst part of this book I want to talk about first, which is the prologue. when you first start reading it, it's bad, it's ugly. It's the first sentence is good. The first sentence, a room full of violence to come. Sure, good opening. And then immediately goes off the rails. The beginning of this really kind of reminded me of No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy, the book. When I first read that book, I felt like I was reading a screenplay. Of course, it's a screenplay that has been embellished with all kinds of words like immolator and torso meat. But essentially, it's very bare bones. It's very stripped down. It's not very China Miéville-like, I guess I can say. And I felt like the prologue was maybe more Keanu and less China. There seems to be very weird attempts at humor. Like there's this guy who's looking at a scanner and he's looking across the room. He's looking on the screen at some guys across the room and he's attempting to lip read. The scanner is giving him like the lip reading in dialogue, but it's wrong and it's supposed to be funny, I think, but it just came across as very bizarre and confusing. But anyway, all I want to say is if you open this book and you start reading and you think like, man, this is pretty terrible, just remember that the prologue is probably the worst part of the book by far. And then immediately we come to one of the segues, which I also thought was a little bit weird. The book kind of stumbles as it begins. The very first segue, it centers on this famous doctor from history, which I'm not going to spoil who that is, and B, the main character B, and they're having this sort of a philosophical discussion or a discussion about B's life. This is where we learn that B is, whenever he dies, he's immediately resurrected. He wants to know why. Of course, the doctor doesn't have any answers for him. And then we finally get to the chapter Signs of Life, which I felt like, okay, it's sort of now beginning. There's a good line. A man, let's call him a man, walked this route. He considered that predatory sky. He stood below a little figure in red LED swaying from the traffic light, absurd at an intersection between nothing and nothing. And these are great lines. I mean, this is China Miéville. There's also on page 20 there's a dead body, and it's described as the leader of this group of declared enemies. And I like that because that says a lot about B's perspective. Declared enemies. I'm sure for someone who's 80,000 years old, the concept of allies and enemies is quite different from the rest of us. So B walks to the edge of the city, he goes down in some tunnels, and there's something suspicious going on down there amongst all of the corpses, and that's where sort of the mystery begins. And then we get to the another segue, which is called Water, and this is kind of a flashback. It's told in a very kind of a legendary way. It's showing B from ancient times, back when he was known as Unut. Once you spent 3 lifetimes sitting without moving on a stone chair halfway up a mountain to see what would happen. Nothing happened. It's close to 1,000 years since you were last surprised. You tell your mother's memory that in the epochs that followed her death, people forgot how to ride horses, and then the horses went wild again, and then people learned again, and forgot again. So these kinds of lines, you can really see, it puts us in the perspective of B's, his gigantic history, and he's seen the rise and fall of all of these civilizations and natural history, geologic history, society, and human evolution. Also in this chapter, we learn that he has 2 fathers. He has a day father, which is the human father, and then he has a night father. And I'm not sure if I should spoil that. Maybe if you find out that information, you can kind of read it for yourself. But anyway, he has basically a human father and then a more of a mystical father of the elements, if you will. And then on to the chapter New Dark, which has the first truly funny line. He considered how people now enjoyed such names of weapons. On the table, B placed a Sig Sauer P320 chambered with a 10-round 45 ACP magazine, a Daewoo K5 full of 9mm, a K-Bar Becker BK22, and a GI Tonto, both unsheathed, an extended S&W baton. He arranged them in a neat line. He considered how people now enjoyed such names of weapons, as if gun, knife, stick was not enough, was not as true. You will only perceive your tools when they are broken, he remembered. I love that line. You will only perceive your tools when they are broken, he remembered. And we also meet Diana Ahuja, who's a military intelligence, although I never found out what rank she is or anything like that, who basically, she joined the military in order to study B, or Unut. She considers herself an Unutologist. She is keeping B medicated, but he has gone off of his medication, and then he disappears off the military's radar, and something to do with what happened down in those secret tunnels that I mentioned earlier. We are also introduced to Stephen Caldwell, who is the head of the Belief Systems and Technology. He's kind of a cliche. He's a bow tie wearing scientist, archaeologist, with an accent, but he also carries a switchblade in his pocket, so, there's more to him than meets the eye. On page 58, Diana and Caldwell visit B's office for the first time, and it's kind of weird because they've never known where his office was in this secret government laboratory. And B says that it's not on any diagram or on any layout of the building. He clasped his hands on the desk. Diana had never seen him so like a teacher. She lowered herself into a seat considerably more comfortable than her own. "Are these Ames chairs?" she said. "Yeah," Unut said. "They're 117s. I like the armrests. I always found Aerons overrated." Part of her wanted to bray with laughter and never stop, at this man liking one chair more than another. She felt such giddiness whenever Unut expressed any preference for anything. "I like that stuff," he had said to her once when he'd entered the kitchenette as she was heating up a pan of popcorn, and she remembered the tide of hysterics she had had to batten down as he waited for her to tear open the foil. What could you do but cackle at the lunacy of the fact that one who had, eons ago, crossed humanless continents on land bridges long sunk, who had stabbed mammoths to deaths with their own tusks, who had been ancient when Gilgamesh was young, preferred Jiffy Pop to Orville Redenbacher's popcorn, or Betty Crocker to the baker's dozen, or Ames to Herman Miller, or Franklin Christoph Pens to Mont Blanc, or pizza to noodles, or anything to anything at all? What could any of it matter to one such as him? Everything mattered, though, was what she had begun to understand. That's a cool moment, again, from the perspective of Diana trying to understand B and then B himself. Why shouldn't he like nice things? He's been around for 80,000 years. Of course he has preferences. There is one thing that really bothered me in this chapter, and that was on page 62. He's talking about watching some wild animals, and he says, "But this was one of those prime directive stay out of it times, so I was just watching." And prime directive, if you don't know, is a reference to Star Trek, which is fine, but it kind of snapped me out of the story. I was like, B's referencing Star Trek? I mean, I guess so, but it seemed a little out of character and a bit strange. At the bottom of page 60, B explains how the usual story is bullshit, that it goes Paleolithic ignorance, and then, he clapped his hands, Neolithic revolution. Then you give it a few more thousands of years, and poof, you've got writing, and now finally the party begins. He shook his head. "I've told you, it went up and down a ton of times. You get a fire, or pyroclastic flow, or meteor strike, or me, or whatever, and the slate's wiped. There are always reasons you can't find evidence. People rode horses when I was born. The first time I learned to read was 77,000 years ago. Then shit happens, and that gets lost. Later it starts again. Same with agriculture, same with math, same with astronomy, animal husbandry, city planning. You get the picture." And at the bottom of page 61, Diana. Of course, she never doubted it, or thought she did, and wanted to. Diana could never be cast iron certain that B wasn't just fucking with them. Because he talks about, hunting dragons out of the sky, and this technology that ancient civilizations had that, of course, doesn't exist now, and we've never even conceived of it. And this kind of stuff, I wanted more of this in the book, actually. I really like this. I really like B's perspective of being alive for 80,000 years. And it kind of reminded me of American Gods by Neil Gaiman a little bit. There's a section in American Gods that's, it's kind of one of the interludes, Coming to America, 14,000 BC. The native people have a god who's made of the skull of a mammoth and the mammoth's hide, and they carry their god on long poles, and they cover it with bear skin so it will not be seen by profane eyes, or at times when it is not holy. Whoever puts on the mammoth hide and the mammoth skull is able to speak in the voice of the god, especially after they have the ceremony where everyone takes the psilocybin mushrooms. And little by little, the native people travel across the land bridge, and they come from Eurasia to North America. And their children and grandchildren and so on, the subsequent generations lose touch with a lot of the tradition. And they lose their shamaness, they lose their holy woman as they travel, and little by little, their gods and their traditions are forgotten. And I love the way that Gaiman does that. I feel like China Miéville was doing something similar, and those parts of the book I was really, really into. The end of the chapter, New Dark, has an astonishing revelation that really, really kicks off the book, and I felt like after 4 chapters, the book finally began here. with the chapter New Dark. So if you want to give this book a chance, I would say at least read the first 4 or 5 chapters before you give up on it. It's clunky to begin with. It takes a while. It kind of goes all over the place. But then finally, with the chapter New Dark, it really starts to go. It really starts to move. Okay, just let me talk about the bad points first. I know I kind of already talked a little bit, but there's some kind of ridiculous elements that I think are carried over from the comic. I wish that this had been a little bit separated, or, I wish it had been kind of reimagined. But I feel like those holdovers from the comic book kind of hold it back. I feel like if there was less violence, I would have enjoyed it more. Even though I like violence, I like darkness, but it just took me out of it sometimes, or I was kind of like, all right, the faceless powers that be keep B in this government facility, although he's allowed to come and go as he wants. They're trying to make super soldiers out of his DNA and his blueprint, which, yeah, sure, comic books. But also there's these ridiculous things like the program is so top secret that it's referred to as NEBE, N-E-B-E, not even B's ears. Or there's this area that's marked off as OOBU, which is out of bounds for Unut. And that stuff is it just makes it silly. Campy, I don't know. There's even like a groan-inducing pun where they say Plan B. There's also some kind of weird things like where B has this incredible memory. He remembers literally everything that's ever happened to him. He points to a map talking about a location in Indonesia. And he's like, that's, 17,000 years before. But of course, it wasn't like Indonesia then. And I was thinking, like, how did he know 17,000 years is a really long time? Like, did he really know that location, even though the landscape has changed, the geologic shifts, and he knows now it's Indonesia and it didn't used to be, but there's another sequence early in the book where he's being hunted by this monster that has been chasing him for millennia, and he goes to this abandoned office building, goes to the top of the office building, and he finds his desk, and he lays out all of his weapons, and he sits there for 2 days. He doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep, he doesn't piss, he doesn't shit, he doesn't talk. And I was thinking, how does this guy kill time? He's 80,000 years old. He has to be good at killing time. He's good at killing things. But how does he kill time? How does he wait? And I thought they could put a little something in there. He's got his little methods to kill time, or even just, he's thinking about something. What is he thinking about for 2 days, sitting in a chair at a desk in an abandoned building? The middle chapters of the book have some scenes that drag. I didn't feel much for the cardboard cutout stereotypes and archetypes. There's kind of ridiculous love interests and like twisty background stories that just kind of don't mean anything and don't go anywhere. Caldwell, who's the archaeologist, magically has the ability to do genetics research without any team helping him. There's a soldier whose personality seems to just be that he's gay. He joins this self-help group, kind of like Fight Club or something, where the coach brings out this foam dummy with the Death's head on it and says, "Death sucks, like, let's kick Death's ass." And I didn't really know what I was supposed to be thinking or feeling during these times. I was kind of like, why is this in here? And are they trying to make some kind of a statement about, it's okay to go to therapy? It's, I don't know, faceless lab people, corporate cults. None of these things really matter to the story much, even though you would kind of hope some of the conspiracy stuff would have a bigger bite or lead to something bigger. But it just kind of becomes a subplot that meanders around, and there's some conspiracy, and this person isn't who you thought they were, and then it's just gone, and you're like, okay, I guess that's all it was. There's even a weird kind of cliche, like very cinematic moment where there's this helicopter drop in some Middle Eastern country. There's a shootout, and B's there killing everyone. That because he's the best at what he does. He has to retrieve the ancient mystery box, and it's barely sketched out. It doesn't even take up, I think it was like 1 or 2 pages or less, and I was kind of like, what? it just seemed like they didn't have enough time to even flesh that out. I mean, it was a cliche scene to begin with, but it was just so brief and so pointless. And then to make it even weirder, it just cuts to B is back at the lab, and he's covered with blood, fresh from the battle, and he's just talking with Diana, like in a hallway, and he gives her the mystery box so she can pass it on to Caldwell, and they're just kind of chatting. And I found this to be very strange because in the earlier chapter, when he comes back from, his mission, he immediately showers, he gets bandaged, he has this group of handlers around him sort of taking care of him and asking him questions and whatever he needs, leading him wherever he's supposed to go. And in this scene, there's just none of that. And it seemed weird and inconsistent to me. After one of the characters is attacked by something that no one can explain, this is kind of a minor spoiler, but I think if I don't tell you the details, you'll be fine. One of the characters is attacked by something that cannot be explained, and afterwards the person shows no emotion, and talking with B, they sort of just put on like a vinyl record and start chatting about music and other things, even though, an hour or two earlier, the person was attacked. It seemed strange. The investigation into this whole mysterious happening is just delayed while they listen to vinyl records and chat. And then the thing that got me the most, the thing that I really was like on the same level as saying Plan B, the clue, the piece of the puzzle that will lead to the big revelation and you'll be able to solve the mystery. The crucial piece to the puzzle is literally a puzzle piece, like a jigsaw puzzle piece. There's a cluster of mysteries at the center of this story that B is trying to untangle and solve all of the loose ends. And on page 309, B himself says, "I'd call them mysteries, but are they still mysteries if I didn't care what the secrets were?" And I thought to myself, I kind of feel that way about a lot of parts of this book. Like, I know there's mysteries, but I just didn't really care that much because it's not very consistent and it's not very well thought out, or it doesn't really lead anywhere. The setups don't always pay off quite the way that you hope that they would. I felt like the world outside the laboratory and outside the ancient history was very poorly developed. B sort of goes around without any supervision. He murders people, he steals cars, he wanders around. Nothing happens to him, there's no repercussions. That seemed also a little strange to me at times, partly because some of those scenes are kind of unnecessary. So now on to the things that I did like. The book begins with some interludes a little too quickly. I felt like the structure was not very well done in that way. It could have been resequenced, but the interludes themselves are fantastic. There's the servant's story, which is back in the day, there was a girl who traveled with B and she served him, and it's her perspective. There's Tooth, which is explaining about the kind of interesting revelations from ancient times. The wife's story, Brother, the stowaway's story, which is kind of a very Mieville ghost story. Life, the orphan story, and Blood. On page 88, Diana says, "I'm never sure whether you'd prefer it if old grimoires would or wouldn't work better than nano-scattering ab-neutron field progression." And I like that too, because B's seen it all, and these scientists are trying everything that they can think of. They're using the most cutting-edge nano-scattering equipment, and then they're also using, these ancient grimoires and books of magic and demonology, trying to figure out any possible way to understand what B is and how he is and where he's going. And also on page 88, there's a reference to William Hope Hodgson, who's an amazing, weird author from way back in the day, kind of an unknown, who's similar to H.P. Lovecraft. He wrote a really great book called The House on the Borderland. The critiques of religion and beliefs and the progress or de-evolution of civilization are all really well done. As I said before, it reminded me a little bit of American Gods, the cabals, the conspiracies that last for millennia, strange mythological beasts. All of B's stories, when he does tell a story, are really well done. So, in conclusion, the Book of Elsewhere. Was it original? Nope. I've seen this idea before. It reminded me of The Old Guard, which is a comic written by Greg Rucka and adapted by Netflix with Charlize Theron. I kept thinking of John Wick whenever I saw the descriptions of B, because he seems to look exactly like Keanu Reeves. There's, very comic booky elements, the Wolverine's berserker rage and the healing factor, even The Flash, DC Comics The Flash, getting struck by lightning and getting his superpowers. All of these things are in this book. Is it as good as anything else that China Miéville has written? No, it's not. China Miéville is an incredible author. As I said at the beginning of this video, Perdido Street Station is one of my favorite books of all time. Also in the same world, The Scar, and there's other novels as well. The City and the City, fantastic books. Does the Book of Elsewhere compare to that? No, it does not. Is it well told? Yes, it is. I think the problem here is that you have a 5-star chef, but you give them only the ingredients for fast food. You give them fast food ingredients, and how much can you really do with what you're given? Well, China Miéville did his best, for sure. But it's just the core of the thing that is cliche and kind of lacking. If you're not used to reading weird fiction, if you're not used to reading science fiction, yeah, I can see how maybe it would be a little difficult, but it's very easy to read. It's very fun. It goes by quick. I'm a slow reader, and I read this in just a couple days. Was it fun? Hell yes, it was. There's everything you can imagine in this book. It's completely bonkers. And, it's told very well. It moves right along, and it's fun. If you don't take it too seriously, you'll have a great time. At the start of this video, I asked, who is B? Is he a cursed man? Is he a demigod? Is he an alien? Is he some kind of weapon? Is he just a force for chaos? And I can tell you, after reading 337 pages of this thing, I don't know. I still don't know. Is that a spoiler? If so, I'm sorry. More than once, B is described as a black silhouette standing against a lesser dark, and I kind of felt like that was all I really got from him. Even though you do see some of his past, and he does tell a few stories, he's really not a very memorable character in terms of, I felt like I knew who he was. I just felt like I knew his history. I knew about him. He's a guy that things happen to. Does he have any agency himself? That's debatable. Maybe B stands for blank. Maybe he stands for our empty culture of mindless entertainment, the vicariousness of violence, not wanting to die, wanting to remain young forever. Is B just a stylish waste of time? Is he just a vehicle for a TV series, a film adaptation, endless sequels and video game adaptations, in which B will respawn forever, or at least until people get tired of him and then move on to the next thing, and then he gets resurrected a decade later and rebooted all over again? I'd like to hope not. I'd like to hope that this is Keanu Reeves being very excited about his idea and sitting down with his friend China Miéville to make something more and to entertain, as Keanu Reeves is good at. And together they played around with it and they saw what they could make. And they made this interesting, fun, wacky novel. And they also made millions and millions of dollars along the way. So I hope you enjoyed this review. Check it out. If you're a China Miéville fan, definitely check it out. If you're new to China Miéville, yeah, maybe it's an okay introduction to the man, although I really would recommend his other works. All there's left to say is thank you so much for watching. See you again.